Tra-la-la!
Everyone, that is, except for two giggling boys crouching in the shadows beneath the bleachers.
Those were our best pranks yet,
Laughed Harold.
Yep.
Chuckled George.
They'll be hard to top, that's for sure. I just hope we don't get busted for this,
Said Harold.
Don't worry,
Said George.
we covered our tracks really well. There's no way we'll get busted.
Chapter 6. Busted. The next day at school, an announcement came over the loudspeakers. George Beard and Harold Hutchins, please report to Principal Krupp's office at once.
Uh-oh,
Said Harold.
I don't like the sound of that. Don't worry,
Said George.
they can't prove anything.
George and Harold entered Principal Krupp's office and sat down on the chairs in front of his desk. The two boys had been in this office together countless times before, but this time was different. Mr. Krupp was smiling. As long as George and Harold had known Mr. Krupp, they had never, ever seen him smile. Mr. Krupp knew something. I didn't see you boys at the big game yesterday, said Mr. Krupp.
No,
Said George.
we weren't feeling well. Yeah,
Harold stammered nervously.
we went home.
Ah, that's too bad, said Principal Krupp. You boys missed a good game. George and Harold quickly glanced at each other, gulped, and tried hard not to look guilty. Lucky for you, I have a videotape of the whole thing, Mr. Krupp said. He turned on the television in the corner and pressed the play button on the VCR. A black and white image appeared on the TV screen. It was an overhead shot of George and Harold sprinkling pepper into the cheerleaders' pom-poms. Next came a shot of George and Harold pouring liquid bubble bath into the marching band's instruments. How do you like the pre-game show? Asked Mr. Krupp with a devilish grin. George eyed the television screen in terror. He couldn't answer. Harold's eyes were glued to the floor. He couldn't look. The tape went on and on, revealing all of George and Harold's behind-the-scenes antics. By now, both boys were eyeing the floor, squirming nervously and dripping with sweat. Mr. Krupp turned off the TV. You know, he said, ever since you boys came to this school, it's been one prank after another. First, you put dissected frogs in the Jell-O salad at the parent-teacher banquet. Then you made it snow in the cafeteria. Then you rigged all the intercoms so they played Weird Al Yankovic songs full blast for 6 hours straight. For 4 long years, you two have been running amok in this school, and I've never been able to prove anything. Until now. Mr. Krupp held the videotape in his hand. I took the liberty of installing tiny video surveillance cameras all around the school. I knew I'd catch you two in the act one day. I just didn't know it would be so easy. Chapter 7. A Little Blackmail. Mr. Krupp sat back in his chair and chuckled to himself for a long, long time. Finally, George got up the courage to speak.
What are you going to do with that tape?
He said. I thought you'd never ask. Laughed Principal Krupp. I've thought long and hard about what to do with this tape, Mr. Krupp said. At first, I thought I'd send copies to your parents. The boy swallowed hard and sank deeply into their chairs. Then I thought I might send a copy to the school board, Mr. Krupp continued. I could get you both expelled for this. The boys swallowed harder and sank deeper into their chairs. Finally, I came to a decision, Mr. Krupp concluded. I think the football team would be very curious to find out just who was responsible for yesterday's fiasco. I think I'll send a copy to them. George and Harold leaped out of their chairs and fell to their knees.
No!
Cried George.
You can't do that. They'll kill us.
Yeah, begged Harold.
They'll kill us every day for the rest of our lives.
Mr. Krupp laughed and laughed.
Please have mercy,
the boys cried.
We'll do anything.
Anything? Asked Principal Krupp with delight. He reached into his desk, pulled out a list of demands, and tossed it at the boys. If you don't want to be dead as long as you live, you'll follow these rules exactly. George and Harold carefully looked over the list.
This is blackmail,
said George. Call it what you like, Principal Krupp snapped. But if you two don't follow that list exactly, then this tape becomes the property of the Horwitz Knuckleheads. Chapter 8. Crime and Punishment. At 6 o'clock the next morning, George and Harold dragged themselves out of bed, walked over to Mr. Krupp's house, and began washing his car. Then, while Harold scrubbed the tires, George roamed around the yard, pulling up all the weeds and crabgrass he could find. Afterward, they cleaned the gutters and washed all the windows on Mr. Krupp's house. At school, George and Harold sat up straight, listened carefully, and spoke only when spoken to. They didn't tell jokes. They didn't pull pranks. They didn't even smile. Their teacher kept pinching herself. I just know this is a dream, she said. At lunch, the two boys vacuumed Mr. Krupp's office, shined his shoes, and polished his desktop. At recess, they clipped his fingernails and ironed his tie. Each spare moment in the boys' daily schedule was spent catering to Mr. Krupp's every whim. After school, George and Harold mowed Mr. Krupp's lawn, tended his garden, and began painting the front of his house. At sunset, Mr. Krupp came outside and handed each boy a stack of books. Gentlemen, he said, I've asked your teachers to give you both extra homework. Now go home, study hard, and I'll see you back here at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. We've got a busy day ahead of us.
Thank you, sir,
moaned the two boys. George and Harold walked home, dead tired.
Man, this was the worst day of my entire life,
said George.
Don't worry,
said Harold.
We only have to do this for 8 more years. Then we can move away to some far-off land where they'll never find us. Maybe Antarctica. I've got a better idea,
said George. He took a piece of paper out of his pocket and handed it to Harold. It was an old magazine ad for the 3D Hypno Ring.
How's this going to help us?
Asked Harold.
All we gotta do is hypnotize Mr. Krupp,
said George.
We'll make him give us the video and forget this whole mess ever happened. That's a great idea,
said Harold.
And the best part is we only have to wait 4 to 6 weeks for delivery.
Don't forget to subscribe and give us a big thumbs up for new app demos every single day.